Hello, welcome to my channel. This is Pastor FEMI OLAITAN. Now, the very first commandment on this channel, subscribe. Click on the subscribe button right away. Subscribe. That's the commandment number 1 on this channel. And make sure you comment, you like the video, subsequently. But subscribe. Do it right now. Don't postpone it. Have you done that? God bless you. Welcome one more time, everyone. This is episode 3, Overcoming Temptation. I want to encourage that you watch the first 2 episodes if you are just joining us for the very first time. Also, I want to encourage you to drop a comment, questions or a comment, and subscribe. All right. We have more episodes coming up and many more videos coming up. And I believe that this series will be a big blessing to you. God bless you. Thank you for joining me today. All right. So this episode 3, take your time to watch episode 1 and 2 after now. And today we are talking about triggers. Triggers. So how can we define triggers? Anything that elicits the thought and the feeling of some emotional weakness or lust, or that some kind of arousement or something, all right, in you can be termed to be a trigger. Anything that elicits such thoughts and feelings, all right, and begins to drive you along that path of temptation is trigger. We can also define triggers to mean anything that evoke an intense desire or cravings to yield to temptation. Anything that evoke that intense desire or cravings, the word cravings, to yield to temptation. And of course, where you notice this is in your thoughts and in your feelings, as it were. So we can literally just say that triggers are anything that turns you on. Anything that turns you on, all right, that turns your weakness on in one way or the other, all right? That is a trigger for you. You know that anytime I come across this, anytime I'm in this space, this kind of feeling comes on, all right? This thing turns me on. This thing somehow evoke, all right, certain kinds of emotions and feeling, all right? You're easily aroused, by certain kind of thought, feelings, people, places, or things, or event. You get? So that can be defined as a trigger. All right, before we go further, I want to read from our anchor scripture. We've been working with James chapter 1, verse number 12 to number 15. Let's read that scripture. And I'm reading from New King James Version. And it says, "Let no one say when he is tempted, all right, I am tempted, for God cannot be tempted." Don't say, "I am tempted by God." Let no one say when he's tempted, "I'm tempted by God." For God cannot be tempted, all right, by evil, and nor does he himself tempt anyone. I've established this in episode 1 and 2, somewhere in between those 2 episodes. The next verse is what I want to look at, verse 14. It says, "But each one is tempted." Each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Each one is drawn away each one is tempted when he or she is drawn away, all right, by his own desires and enticed. This is where triggers comes in. That thing that leads to that pulling away, turning away, drawing away, all right, that thing that turns you on, basically. That's where trigger comes in. But I want you to take note of this line, what I'm about to say right now. People travel on the path of lust unaware, long before they actually fall into that temptation. People usually travel on the path of lust unaware, long before they actually fall into that temptation. That means at the beginning, they are not really thinking about it. Sometimes, hardly will anybody set out with the intention to fall into temptation. No, hardly. All right, hardly will anybody set out for that reason. People oftentimes don't do this. All right, but they travel, they do things, they keep traveling in that road unaware, long before they suddenly realized it. What am I saying? People open themselves up to lust long before they think they do, long before they realize it, long before they think they do. It is the traveling on that road. That is the best time to call yourself to order. That is the best time to put a lock on yourself. That is the best time you have the control. All right. And this should be one of your takeaway. People travel on the road on the path of lust, unaware, long before they actually fall into temptation. What are we saying? People open themselves up to lust, long before they think they do. Be mindful of these things. And that is one of the reasons why we're talking about triggers. Some people are not even aware. At some point, some are not even aware of their own triggers. They don't even know that this thing can trigger me. These things can turn me on. This thing can trigger me. Some people don't even know. All right. And, but you got to come to a point where you've got to find out, as we're going to talk about the process of managing triggers anyway. All right. The solution to it. We're going to talk about it. All right. But I just want you to know that there are signposts, there are signals on that road. There are signs. There are things to note on that road. And when you're traveling that road and you see some of these signs, pay attention, make adjustment, and turn back. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse number 22, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse number 22, it says, flee from every kind of evil. Flee from every kind of evil. Run away from every appearance of evil. Any form, any outlook of temptation. Once it's going to look like it, you've got to find a way to flee, because those are your triggers. That's the point to note. That's the point to take, to be aware, to take the right actions and the right steps. It is at that point. Remember we also said in the last episode that lust is stronger than logic. You can even think you are in your right senses and you are doing nonsense and you won't realize it early enough. So let's get into it. Examples of trigger. Triggers can be both internal and external. We can choose to, I want to categorize it that way. We can say that we're looking at examples now. We're looking at internal triggers, there are external triggers. Internal triggers are related to certain kind of emotions. They are emotional related. They are related to emotions, basically. All right. They are inside. That there are certain kind of emotions that can trigger you, and that here we can talk about number one, boredom. All right. Boredom is critical. Be mindful of boredom. Be mindful of when you are bored, idle moment. Be mindful of such times. That can be a trigger. For a lot of people, that's a major trigger. It's an internal one. Boredom, sadness. Some people, when they are sad, they are more vulnerable when they are sad. Angry. Anger in itself can turn some people on, can make them become vulnerable. Anger, sadness and depression, loneliness. All right. And the last one I'm going to mention here is happiness. When people are happy, they throw caution to the wind. They are no longer conscious of boundaries, and unconsciously their defenses comes down. All their guards comes down. All right, so be mindful of some of these triggers: boredom, anger, sadness and depression, loneliness and happiness. These things can be, you just have to identify which one. I know that for a lot of people, boredom, loneliness, sadness are very powerful ones, all right, that turns a lot of people on unconsciously. Then we're going to look at the external triggers. What are the external triggers? I mentioned quite a few. I'm just going to list them, all right. These are related to people, places, activities, and things. Note what I just said. These are related to people, places, activities, and things. External triggers are related to people, places, activities, and things. They're related to 4 areas. These 4 areas, all right? So number one, chatting, this usual chat, maybe on WhatsApp or something, on social media and all of that. You have to know at what point you are turned on. Chatting can also become addictive, all right, and is a major trigger for some people. It can be a trigger. So you need to pay attention to it and be able to say to yourself, calm down, calm down, calm down, calm down, and be put in some discretion at this point. Chatting can be a trigger. Association can be a trigger. You see, there's other kinds of people you need to identify. There are some people, once you are around them, you lose yourself. See, there's some people that makes you feel very spiritual, or some makes you feel serious. People carry atmosphere. People carry aura, this atmosphere around them. There are some people that get you more focused on your vision. They get you more focused on your destiny. It's not as if there's even speak about it. Their presence alone command focus. So association can be a trigger. Number 3 is social media generally, and this day is a major trigger for a lot of people. In fact, social media can even trigger some people into depression, and all sorts of things, into lack of satisfaction. Some people are going to feel this sense of failure, this sense of I've not done well, I'm backward or something. Social media is a key, is a major one. All right. So chatting, association, social media. I'm just listing them. Number 4, touch and sight. Some people, they respond to touch a lot, and some respond to what they see. And they'll really group it together. All right. Touch and sight, they can both act differently. Some people, take for instance something as basic or as simple as casual as a hug. It can be a trigger sometimes, and I'm telling you the truth. Hugging can be a trigger for some people. So you should know your own. That's what I'm saying here. You should know what trigger you. It may not be it for everybody, and for a lot of for men, what we see, it can be a trigger too. What we see. So you mind the things you see, knowing fully well that this is one of the things that can open you up. So you mind what to give your eyes to. You mind what to give your eyes to. This is very, very important. Touch and sight. Number 5, intimate conversation. Intimate conversation. See, sometimes you got to understand the place of boundaries in talking to people. Intimate conversation means when you talk personal things, deep things, you are revealing, you are speaking, and you are being vulnerable for someone. You are discussing things that are very personal to you, deep heart things, heart-to-heart conversation, as it were. Intimate conversation can be a trigger. All right, it can create a bond, unnecessary bond, sometimes such bonds that you don't even need. All right, so you should know who you should talk to. Not everybody can manage that kind of conversation. Not everybody. This is very powerful. You must pay attention to this. Everyone must pay attention to this. All right, intimate conversations. When someone begins to ask you about certain questions, certain issues, that are very personal, and you are opening up, you are talking, you are asking. Tomorrow you call each other, next morning you call, and you are talking that way. That can create, in fact, take it. This will definitely create a very strong bond, and it can be a major trigger for some people. Number 6, gifts and favor. Out of kindness, favor done to you. Some people gift turns them on. So don't take it from anybody. Anybody you feel that boundaries are not properly set around you and that person, don't take gift from them. All right. Limit the kind of favor you ask for from them. Some people, their defenses goes down once they receive gifts or some act of favor. All right. Then environment. Certain kind of environment also trigger some people. Watching romantic movies and skits. Some romantic movies and skits can also be a trigger. Music with romantic feelings. All right, romantic message and romantic feelings can be a trigger. Idleness, I've mentioned that earlier. In some cases, success, all right, can also be a trigger. So let's quickly do this. Steps to dealing with triggers. How do you deal with it? How do you manage these triggers? How do you deal with it? Number 1, identify and list situations and emotions, places, people, places, and things. People, places, activities, and things that trigger you, sexually, emotionally, that trigger you, that arouses you, all right, that turns you on. Identify and list. Do that personally yourself. That may be your assignment today, all right? In this episode, that is our assignment. I'm giving you this assignment. Get your pen and paper. You can do it now, you can do it after now. Write it down, all right? List, identify and list. As I identify it, write it down. You are listing it. And list it, people, places, events, and things that trigger you sexually, that turns you on, emotionally. Number 2, for each trigger, for each of those triggers that you have identified, we are looking at solutions now. We are looking at solutions. For each of the triggers that you have identified, what should you do? Think of ways you could avoid it. That may mean you have to unfollow some blogs. Yeah, it means you have to unfollow some skit makers. Yeah, it means you have to avoid some people. It means you have to avoid some conversation. All right. The first one here is to avoid it. All right. Yeah, avoid it. How can I avoid this? So you got to think about it. Think of ways you could avoid this. Certain events, you have to bar some event and say, I will never go to such event. Certain conversations, you will never have them again. All right. Number 3, if you cannot avoid it, then come up with a plan of how to respond when you encounter it. If you cannot avoid it, come up with a plan of how to respond. If you cannot avoid it, come up with a plan. How are you going to be responding? Every time this pops up, how are you going to respond? How are you going to be responding every time this person comes around? How are you going to respond every time you are alone? How are you going to respond every time you are bored? How are you going to respond? Come to think about that, all right? Have a plan on how you're going to respond. Number 4, set boundaries and be committed to the boundaries. All right, set boundaries and be committed to that boundaries. Don't test the limit. Just set the boundaries and make sure you stay within the limit of that boundaries, as it were. Number 5, accountability. All right, accountability about you. All right, not necessarily about about you. All right, so be accountable to someone safe. Note the word safe. Safe is important. Yeah, because accountability also can be a problem if not well managed. You understand? And it's not everybody that you can be vulnerable to. Accountability requires vulnerability. Or accountability comes with vulnerability, and it's not everybody can be vulnerable to. So what do? Be accountable, yes, to someone safe. That can also help you. Number 6. I'm going to stop here and I will pick it up from here. Identify and deal with the root cause. This is a very powerful one because every other thing that I've been stated earlier on, it may not be a final solution. This one is the final one. You got to find a way to identify and deal what is the real root cause of this kind of weakness. See, some people are tempted by some people is sexual temptation, some people is greed, is money. I've identified that in the last video. There are 3 categories that we identified there. So identify the root cause of that particular one that you are mostly fall to. All right, identify that one and deal with it. What is the root cause? Why am I easily triggered by loneliness? All right, there must be a reason. Why is that so? Go and check that properly. God bless you. I'm going to stop here. We'll pick it up on episode 4. God bless you. Please, before you go, remember to subscribe. Click on the subscribe button. Just click on the subscribe button. All right, and it's free. And like this video and help to drop your comment and recommend this series to somebody else. Talk about this series to somebody else. God bless you.